Sophie, how are you doing?
I'm well. How are you? It's been a long time.
Good. I know, do you know, this is another podcast, right, where we have recorded before, but never met. Never actually met aside messaging and speaking on a phone in the midst of COVID.
Which is wild thinking back to that. I remember pacing about my old flat at Glasgow Green, really nervous to speak to you. I had in plug-in earphones with a wee microphone that I'd went to go and buy myself, thinking this is going to make the sound quality amazing. And when I listened back to it, I was like, oh my goodness, what did that sound like? I sounded like I was paging in from a completely random country a bazillion miles away because it was really, really muffled. So I'm glad to have the opportunity to sit opposite you properly.
3 years ago.
3 years. Yeah. So much has happened.
Well, this is what we'll get into, because obviously 3 years ago, totally different career path. You were doing different things. I suppose the first question is what changed? What made you go and do different things, and what made you look at different paths? Well, revisit paths, I suppose, is the term.
Definitely. I think change is such an inevitable thing, and it's not something that we should be scared of. I think change is something that we need to embrace, and you're totally right. What I do now is almost a complete 180, but when you sit back and you think about it, actually, you're still doing news. You're just on the other side of the news desk. So I was working at STV when we first spoke to each other, and that was incredible. I had so many fantastic experiences working there. I was 23 and presenting the STV News at 6. Never in my wildest dreams did I ever think that I would get there. But, when I was younger and I set myself that goal, I thought, at what age do I want to do that? And I was thinking, well into my 30s, my 40s. And I got there really early and I was like, great, but I want to keep on continuing to try and better my career progression. So I went back to reporting. I was down at Good Morning Britain as a freelance reporter producer, which was the dream. It was unbelievable. And now I work in public relations. So I work on the other side of the news desk. I still get to tell stories. I still get to chat to people. I'm just not up until midnight working every night. I've got a Monday to Friday 9 to 5, and it is great. I work with an incredible team of people who are so supportive and so empowering in their approach to work every single day. I wake up in the morning with a great big smile on my face because I know that I'm going to a job that I just absolutely adore. And whilst I've been really lucky in the jobs that I've had before, it just felt like the right move for me at that time, and I'm loving it.
Nice. And it's not even taking away that, you're also back into beauty pageants. You're also doing modelling. So one career isn't really enough. It's more of a kind of, let's branch out and see where we land.
Do you know what? It's so funny because when I first started working in broadcasting, I was Sophie, the news presenter. And as much as that was incredible, it was just another facet of me. Yes, I'm this person, but I'm also this person. A lot of people don't know that I've been a model since I was 17. And as well as some people might have, you'd maybe get an odd comment on social media, or, someone would dig up a picture from the past. It's something that's been a huge part of my life for nearly 10 years now. I started modelling when I was 17 by pure fluke. Right. I walked into the place where I bought my prom dress, Envy Gowns in Falkirk. And at that point, they were based in Grangemouth. The owner of the shop pulled me to one side and she was like, I know I've just met you. I run a competition every single year for the face of our brand. Do you want to do it? And I had never thought of doing anything like that before. I grew up as a tomboy. I don't think I looked at makeup until I was about 14. I was running about in my big cousin's hand-me-downs and his football boots and his jogging bottoms. And I totally it was never ever something that I ever considered. And I thought, you know what, why not give this a bash? Totally out of my comfort zone. And I did it and I won. And I was completely gobsmacked. And everything just sort of snowballed from there. The photographer who was there that night really, really pushed me to go and do more sort of photo shoots and, these things that are called time for print shoots. So basically as a sort of young model or a model who's very much at the beginning of their career, going away and shooting with photographers. Instead of exchange for payment, it would be, we're going to give you these high quality images for your portfolio.
Right.
So I did an awful lot of that. And then I was signed on the spot by an agency in Glasgow. No longer exists, but it was called Superior Model Management. And it was amazing. And right the way through university, I modelled. Even when I was working, in my first broadcasting jobs, I was able to model. And it was around about that time that, I was being encouraged, have you ever thought about doing something like Miss Scotland?
Yeah.
Have you ever considered going back and doing a competition again? So I thought, why not give it a go? And did it and came second in Miss Scotland, which was absolutely crazy to me at the time. I remember growing up watching these girls in the paper and, seeing all of the camaraderie around it and thinking, I will never, ever, ever be able to do that.
Yeah.
So at that moment for me was incredibly surreal. And I went on to do Miss Scotland again, had a fantastic time. And after the second time I did it, I landed my job at SCV like 4 months afterwards.
Right.
Which was just crazy. So since then, my focus had really shifted from modelling and all of these things that I was doing sort of in the extracurricular to focusing on my career. And I'm so glad that I did it, because the experiences and the people that I met and the doors that opened for me were unbelievable. And to do that all in my early 20s has now afforded me to be in a position where I can now revisit that in my mid-20s and fall back in love with that industry again, which is exactly what I'm doing.
Have you noticed any changes from when you were first involved to now? Maybe good or bad, I suppose, but what are the biggest things you've noticed since kind of coming back into that industry?
There were some massive changes, and it's been really nice to sort of observe that over the past 10 years that I have been involved in pageantry. But there have been some huge significant steps forward, not just here in the UK, but right across the world. Miss Universe is a great example of an organisation which has scrapped its upper age limit. You can now be married and enter that competition, have a child, you can be a transgender woman. And it's really, really encouraging to see those sorts of changes within pageantry as a whole. Miss International, which is a competition which I'm taking part in, I know that we'll go on and speak about that a little bit later, but that's another competition which is really trailblazing and is really leading the way in shifting society's values and opinions about pageantry. It works really, really closely in alignment with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which is all about addressing some of the biggest issues that face society globally. And it's very empowering to be part of an organisation that does that, but also has the ethos of cheer all women, which is all about making sure that women can be empowered to be the very, very best versions of themselves. And I know for me, I'm really proud to be part of that and to be part of an organisation that has taken such significant steps forward in changing the face of pageantry around the world.
Love that. We will touch on that later. I wanted to ask you, I was actually thinking about this when I was planning my questions on Saturday. The whole modelling world obviously can get a pretty bad rep for people trying to get into it, be it male, female, however you recognise yourself. You've been in that experience from a young age, and you've obviously maybe seen pitfalls, or you've seen people make mistakes, or you've been in those situations yourself. But what advice would you give to someone in that industry? Because it's a tough place to try and break into, and you see a lot of people who have maybe tried it, not worked out, and it can leave people confidence-wise shattered if they can't, because someone's telling them you're not pretty enough or you're not a certain type. But how was that from your perspective? Because you're obviously in the industry, so you've seen those sort of things.
I have seen it firsthand, and you're completely right. Being in a position that has observed some really tough things is quite a hard thing to be, and a hard place to be. I think my advice to anybody who is considering modelling at all is definitely speak to people, get to know their experiences of it, and really think about whether or not it's a career choice or even a hobby that they want to get into themselves. I think Scotland is one of the most culturally diverse countries in the whole of the world, and we really celebrate that. And it's been really, really encouraging to see not only agencies born out of celebrating diversity, but also a real range of models now coming to the fore who aren't, your tall and skinny size 6. I'm one of them. I am on the shorter height of what would be classed as the sort of typical model height. I'm 5'8". I'm not a size 6. And that's something that I have really had to learn to accept, that that's never going to be me. I think when you surround yourself with people like that within the modelling industry, which, as you say, can be quite cutthroat, it becomes very empowering. And when you know that you're not the only person who is maybe having these negative feelings about yourself, and you can lean on other people who have maybe experienced something similar, that can help you make the process of exploring modelling and getting to know whether or not it's something that you want to be involved with a lot easier.
Do you feel better now having been doing it like kind of on and off since you were 17, do you feel in a better place now if you get approached for jobs, etc., that you can make a more balanced, rather than, I'd imagine at that age, a lot of people just jump at jobs because you're like, I might not get another one, this might be the one for me, but do you look at it now like, well, if it's not right for me, I'm not doing it?
Totally. And I think that speaks volumes about the maturity of a person. You know, I'm 26 now and I'm a very, very different person as to what I was when I was 17. I look back at some of the shoots that I did when I was 17 and I can't help but cringe. There was one where I was dressed up, I kid you not, as a tree. I had been, and it was for a friend's, she's now a friend, but back then I didn't know who she was.
Right.
And it was for her art assignment at university. And a photographer that I'd worked with quite a lot was like, right, let's get Sophie in to do it. And we went to a park in the East End of Glasgow. Bearing in mind I was from Falkirk and had never been to the East End of Glasgow before.
What an experience.
Well, I didn't know what to expect. And I just remember standing in this park with like bits of bark stuck on me, with leaves coming out my head. You know when you're a kid and they're like going to cast you as a tree in the school play? That's kind of like what was going on, except I was 17 and in the middle of Denniston. So I look back at those pictures now and absolutely, it's the kind of thing where when you're first breaking into the industry and you really are looking for any experience that you can get, it was certainly something that I wouldn't choose to do now.
Yeah.
But I think, again, a lot of that comes from working with a range of different photographers, a range of different creatives, and sort of learning to understand what kind of work works for you and maybe what kinds of work might be better suited to someone else.
Yeah.
Me, for example, now, you know, I'm never going to be on the front page of Vogue. Like, that was never a goal for me, but I'm very aware that I'm more suited to commercial modelling, and I'm really lucky to work with an amazing bridal store in Glasgow who have premises right up and down the country. They very much encouraged me back into the world of modelling after not having done it for so long, and it's really, really empowering to be in a position and a place that celebrate the way that I look and love the fact that I look like a normal person, and that's just a really, really special environment to be in.
Did you feel nervous about going back to it?
Incredibly nervous.
Right.
Incredibly nervous. I think that's natural, especially if you take a step back from something for so long. You know, I was out and about when I got the email through from Neve from the White Collection, and I was coming home from a wee break up north, and I turned around and said to my other half, you know, this girl, I've known this girl from years and years back when I was actually modelling for a prom dress company. And had never ever thought that she would ever think to reach out to me again, particularly because I hadn't modelled for so long. And I remember turning around to my other half and being like, first of all, I don't know if this is real. Like, I don't know if this...
Like a scam email.
But, you know, thankfully I knew who Neve was, and because I'd had such a positive experience with her previously, I was super happy to work with her again. It was a new company to Glasgow. I hadn't heard of them previously. I did my research and felt comfortable and confident enough to go along for a fitting and just completely fell back in love with it again, because you are surrounded by such an empowering group of women in that position.
Yeah.
It was really, really special. And you know, now I regularly model for this company. And while it was never a career or a job or a hobby that I ever found myself falling back into, I'm really glad that it's happened, because I love my body now more than I ever have. I'm not picking myself apart as much as what I did when I was broadcasting 5 days a week. I'm not looking back at my images and going, oh my goodness. Like,
did you do that when you were like on TV? Yeah, were you really like
absolutely, of
self-critical?
course. I was 21 when I first started broadcasting. So, you know, when you put someone that young in a public facing role, there are always going to be comments, and there are always going to be, you know, people who are making a judgment about you. And I think it's very natural at that age to maybe take a little bit more heed of them as what you would when you're a little bit older. I know that's just for me personally, and everybody has different experiences of that, but I know that I would sit after I had recorded my bulletin and then we'd go back and watch it back after I'd come off air, and we'd be like, oh, my hair's not great there. Oh gosh, my blend's not brilliant there. Oh, that top makes me look like a bit of an old lady. Like, but it was one of those things. I think, now if I was to ever be in that position again, I'd be a little bit more relaxed about it. Of course, you're always going to want to make sure that your hair's sitting all right. We had that conversation before we started recording the podcast. So it's always something that I think, when you are in a public facing role that you are aware of. But certainly back then, I was a little bit more self-conscious about that. I'm now in a place where I really love and I celebrate myself. And if I go on screen and there's a hair out of place, I'm not, tearing my own hair out.
It's not the end of the world.
Exactly.
Fair enough. I want to ask you about the public relations side of things as well. And it's probably an industry that most people look at with interest, but don't really know what it is. See, when people go out in public relations, I'm always like, what does that mean? What does that actually mean? But from your point of view, how would you describe it as a job? What does your day look like?
So every day is different. Right. And that is what the best thing is. If I could sum it up in a sentence or a phrase, I would say you are helping to shape the news agenda, but from the other side of the news desk. Okay. So instead of being the people that communicate the news to audiences, we will help journalists find that news, or we will, help shape stories that then will filter down into the news that you will see every single day. So for example, I work with a lot of consumer facing clients, some of the biggest household names that, lots of people will know right across the country, your likes of Specsavers and Tesco's within the community. And it's up to us to make sure that we're doing almost in-house journalism, speaking to those people within those organisations, finding out the stories, and then writing those press releases and sharing them with journalists. Now, we can never say you have to run this, because that's just not how it works unless you're doing like paid for stuff. Which is very, very normal to do anyway within this industry, especially if you're doing like an advertorial. That's where paid for would come into with that. But I would certainly say you're helping to shape the news agenda, but from the other side of the desk. That's why you find quite a lot of journalists who make that transition across to PR. There's loads of fun things that come with the job as well. I'm really lucky to work in an industry that's very, very sort of open to having you experience and try lots of different bits within that role. So I work really closely with a lot of influencers. I work closely with lots of journalists and organising media review stays to hotels. There are worse things to get up in the morning to do than invite people to come and have a nice hotel stay. But you do all that, and then you've got all of the event side of things as well. So, assisting in running big events on behalf of our clients. It's really great. It's like journalism with a little sprinkle of fun.
I suppose it's kind of like the news, but you've got the variety to choose a little bit more about what you're doing. Definitely.
And I think it's not so much about having that variety to choose different things, because at the end of the day, you're still talking about stories that matter to people. And that's what's at the heart of journalism as well. At the end of the day, news only happens because people and communities make stories. And as a journalist, it's your responsibility to give a voice to those communities that wouldn't necessarily have a platform to speak. You're doing exactly the same, except you're doing it on the other side. So instead of walking into a community here in Glasgow, we will walk into a Specsavers store in Glasgow, and we'll sit down with the team and we say, right guys, what's going on? And they'll say, look, we've just had this person who has qualified after 10 years of studying with us, or we're about to launch a revolutionary new service that's going to completely transform the way that eye care is delivered here in the community. So you're still finding all of those stories, but you're just doing it on the other side.
Nice. Very good description of PR.
Thank you.
I like that. I feel more educated now.
Now, if anyone asks you if you're out and about,
I'll be like, sit yourself down. I'm going to run through this. Not a problem. Miss International.
Yes.
So it's not enough that you've obviously got a full-time gig. You're modelling on the side. You then think, I'll go back into beauty pageantry as well. Why not?
Completely. Again, it was very much a waiting until the time was right to do it again. Obviously, I concentrated on my career so greatly that there really was no other time to do anything.
Did you always want to? Did you always want to go back to it at some point?
100%. I knew in myself that it was something that I wasn't finished with. I actually was shortlisted as a finalist for Miss International UK in 2020.
Right.
And then COVID happened. And my responsibilities went from just sort of being a production journalist at STV to delivering news bulletins. And so the public's perception of me had to be Sophie Wallace from the news. And whilst I'm so grateful for that opportunity, it just wasn't the right time to pursue a pageant. When I came away from news and I had a bit of time to sort of find my feet in PR and think about what kind of way I wanted my career to go, I ended up having a little bit more free time on the side, which meant that not only have I been able to go back to pageantry, but I've also been able to do all of the really important things that having a platform like this does allow for. I've worked with a number of charities since 2017, most namely the STV Children's Appeal, where I was an ambassador for 2 years, Carers Trust Scotland. I've worked with those guys on and off since 2017 as well, just to help amplify the voices of unpaid carers across the UK and Scotland. And hearing all of those guys' stories really inspired me to go back and put myself into a position and give myself a platform where I can continue to amplify the voices of people in a really positive way.
Nice. I've got to ask, obviously, and we'd spoke about Amy beforehand, and Amy had been on when she was doing her pageantry as well. Charity is obviously massive part of it, and it probably, as you said there, it gives you that platform to do something good for the community or something that you hold dear to you. And you've started your own thing with, I'm going to remember the name here, Helping Hats.
There we go.
Yes. Talk me through it.
Yes. Helping Hats was born out of a love for crafting, believe it or not.
Was not expecting that there.
Believe it or not, I like most people, was found at a bit of a loose end during the pandemic and was looking at different ways of keeping myself occupied. And I discovered crochet.
Nice.
Which, as like a 22 or 23-year-old at the time, when I told everybody that I was starting crochet, they were kind of like, what?
That you're right.
Are you like an elderly lady trapped inside a young person's body? But I started crocheting, and one of the first things that I ever learned to do was to make a hat.
Right.
And it eventually got to the stage where there were hundreds of hats everywhere. And I was like, what am I going to do with all of these hats? And it didn't feel right for me to, start selling them or start. That had never been an interest of me. But when I was doing lots of charity work, I was able to sort of consider on a greater perspective what I could do myself personally to give back to all of these communities that I'd helped before. So I officially launched Helping Hats last November, and it's a campaign to ensure that every single child does not go cold. So far, we've helped provide 150 handmade woolly hats to children living in poverty right across Scotland.
Nice.
And I've got big ambitions to grow that. I would love to take that platform right across the UK and work with organisations on a global scale to make sure that we're not only addressing but eliminating that poverty gap and making sure that kids aren't going cold.
Love that.
Thank you.
I love that. I'm going to ask you some career questions.
Of course.
So, I seen this the other day on something else. Not that I'm going to plug them, but I'm going to steal it. If you could go back, right, and redo any part of your career or any kind of section, what would it be?
Wow, you put me on the spot with that one.
No, that's the thing. No, I hide the questions, you see.
I like that.
It makes for better answers.
You're right. It makes it more authentic.
Yes.
I would have started a podcast.
Really?
Completely. I would have started a podcast. And I'm not saying that's something that I would ever rule out, but I think when you sit down and you watch the news or you listen to the news, we're getting a really, really short space of time to tell a story. And there were so many people that I spoke to throughout my career as a journalist that had incredibly powerful stories to tell. And I just wish that I would be able to share those interviews with everyone. And so being able to sit down to someone like we are now and being able to speak openly and candidly about the issues that affect them and that they're really passionate about, I think that's just something that's really special. And so if I was to go, right the way back to the height of my career and consider, if I had time to do anything else, then I 100% would have launched a podcast, because I think it's really important that people have a platform to tell their stories.
Like a news podcast. That's quite a niche.
It is. I've got an idea. Can I run it by? Will we just catch up after this?
That's quite a good idea, isn't it? It's like a wee news at 10. That.
Kind of, yeah. I think, it's really important that we reflect ideas that are of all different places and come from different places. And I think it's really important that we get a really balanced view. And again, when you're doing the news and when you're reading the news, you're always coming from a place of balance. There is no bias there. And it's really, really important that those voices are heard. But I think just giving them a bit more of a platform to be able to speak and not have their interviews cut down to a 20-second soundbite, just actually giving them that opportunity to sit down and chat, I think is something that I would have always been really interested in. And like I say, never say never. It might be something that I do in the future, but that's what I would have done, is launch a podcast.
Nice. See, when you were doing like an interview with someone, how much would you actually record to what made the show?
From the get-go. You record from the get-go. Right. You would actually start your recording probably before the guys jumped onto the Zoom call.
Right.
If not, you would probably open it up with, and I say Zoom call because I was doing a lot of recording during COVID. But if you were working with a camera kit, for example, you would set up the camera kit and you would hit go, and then you would let them know when we were going to start questioning. But you always record from the very, very beginning right the way through to the end. The number one question and the number one piece of advice that I would give to anybody thinking about questioning someone is always ask at the end of your interview, have you got anything else that you'd like to add?
Yeah.
Because that is when you tend to get the most authentic answer. But it means as well that if they've not covered anything off, that they get that opportunity to chat about it. And I think 9 times out of 10, when I was looking at the span of an interview and thinking about what clips would work best with the copy and what would tell the story properly, a lot of that content came from that last question, because people felt comfortable enough to speak to you at that point, but also passionate enough to be able to talk freely to you.
Yeah. But you must have had a lot as well that were this is absolute dynamite, but it never sees the light of day because it's cut or it's just not enough time to show it. To
give you a bit of insight, on the news desks that I worked in radio, quite often we would leave 3 different alternate versions of a clip.
Right.
So what we would do is we would take an interview and we would pick out the 3 best sound bites from that interview, and then we would write 3 scripts that told the story but were maybe written in a different way to go alongside those.
Okay.
And then they would alternate in and out of bulletins.
Right.
With telly, you would do the same thing. So although not all 3 clips would make it to air, because if you think about the News at 6, for example, you've only got one opportunity to share a clip. But you would leave lots of different variations, because it's really important that you get all of those different points of views across. Quite often you'll find that a lot of the clips that don't make it to telly or radio, they'll quite often live online.
Yeah.
So you'll notice that quite often nowadays, the online articles that you read will have an accompanying video with them. And a lot of the clips that don't make it will often live in there.
Right, okay.
So that's a little bit of insight as to how a news desk works, or in my experience, how it works.
Interesting. What's the, or have you got a time you can look back and think where you've really been pushed out your comfort zone?
Yes. Definitely throughout COVID. I had been on screen for 6 weeks, and I used to cover the late shift at STV from Monday to Friday, and the Scotland Tonight team would sit next to you and they would work away, and you would do your late bulletin. Right. And you would lean on each other for support. And I think it was a Thursday night. I want to say it was a Thursday night. Couldn't have been a Thursday night. I only worked Monday and Wednesday. But maybe it was a Tuesday night. Regardless, I had been on screen for 6 weeks, and Nicola Sturgeon announced that Scotland was going into lockdown. And as someone who was right at the start of their career, that was very, very nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
And knowing that you were going to be delivering news of that weight to, you know, hundreds of thousands of people who would be tuning in that evening was really, really nerve-wracking. I remember sitting down with one of my colleagues at the time and asking her for support and help. You know, she had never presented, but she had bags of experience behind her. And I think I just needed an ear to listen to me in that moment. And she was amazing. And I think if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't have made it on screen that night, because I was just like, oh my goodness. And it's so funny now whenever I look back at that clip, because I kept that clip. The way that I broadcasted was so different to the way that, you know, my last ever bulletin on STV. It was just such a shift, and it really was the marking of the start of an incredible career at STV. And it's very, very nostalgic for me to look back at that.
Yeah.
That and broadcasting the death of Sir Sean Connery.
Jeez.
Was really, really nerve-wracking. It was a weekend. That was definitely a weekend that happened. And very, very small team in that weekend. There was me, there was a reporter, there was a producer, and a couple of other bodies across Scotland who were on hand for us that day. And it was a fairly quiet news day. And I remember my colleague at the time, Ryan, turning around and being like, oh, and we were like, what is it? And he had a notification come up on his Apple Watch. Our bulletin was like sitting ready to go for about an hour and a half before we went on air. And he was like, so Sean Connery's just died. And I was like, great.
So you need to rewrite everything at that point?
Wasn't even that point, but when you're dealing with someone who is a national treasure of that stature, you know, there is a huge weight on your shoulders. I phoned John Mackay that day. And I was like, I used to sit next to John in the office. We had a really good relationship. I phoned John and I was like, I need you to support me with this, because a lot of the news agenda at that point had been coronavirus. At that point, there was a little bit of, you know, there was some other little crimey bits, but there was nothing of that nature. And I phoned him and I was like, John, how do I do this? It was like I was back at university learning how to broadcast again.
Day one.
And he was like, just play it straight. He was like, it's a news story. Just do what you do best and go and tell the news. And I came off air physically shaken. There was another instance. Now you're just making all of these memories jog back to me. But my technical debut on the STV News at 6 was a big accident.
Right.
It was during the Euros, and we had John and Kellyanne and Ronnie Charters on location outside Hampden Park. And they would always put another presenter in the studio just in the event that comms went down. Comms never went down, right? So I remember getting myself ready for screen and tottering into the studio, not really worrying about it. Knowing that like 500,000 people were going to be watching, but not thinking about it, and sat myself down in the seat. And I remember texting my friends beforehand, and I was like, took a selfie, and I was like, guys, you know, I'm going to be on standby for the STV News at 6. Ha ha ha, it's not going to happen, but tune in just in case. And I must have jinxed it, because the rolling, like the titles were rolling, and the director in my ear was like, we've lost comms. We've lost comms.
Oh, I'd have been out there at that point.
12 seconds to go. And he was like, right, Sophie, we're coming to you. I think I'd read through the top link like once. And the top link was written for 2 people to like bounce off of each other and say it. It was quite long. Really, you didn't want to be speaking for more than 20 minutes at the top of the programme. But because it was John and Kellyanne meaning to bounce off of each other, it was written for about 45 seconds. It had personality in it. It had loads of fun descriptive words, not something that you would typically see at the start of a news programme, and certainly not something that I had ever done at the start of a weekend bulletin or a late bulletin. And it was just pure adrenaline that took over me. And I sat in that seat and I anchored the programme, I think for about 24, 25 minutes.
Right.
And right at the very, very end, after the sports opt, the guys just, they cut back. They managed to pick up comms again, but they cut back to John, Kellyanne and Ronnie just standing outside Hampden. And I'll never forget the look on their faces. They were just sort of like standing looking down at the screen. And they were like, well, that just happened, guys. Thanks very much for tuning in. See you at 10 o'clock. And it was so out of my comfort zone. But I walked out of that studio and I walked into the newsroom and they were on their feet and they were clapping.
Love that.
And it was the most surreal, crazy experience. My phone was going off the hook. My friends who I had texted to say, tune in and watch me, were like, you told us this wasn't going to happen. And my mum was trying to phone me. She was like, what on earth were you doing on the news at 6? I was like, I don't know.
Just settling down with her dinner.
I was like, hi guys. But it really did push me out of my comfort zone. It made me understand that I could do anything. Yeah. Anything that I put my mind to, I could do it. And it was an incredibly empowering place to be at that moment. And I have never felt so proud of myself because I dreamt about that moment, as cheesy as that sounds. I dreamt about making my News at 6 debut. And as much as it wasn't really the News at 6 debut that I had in mind, it was still incredibly special and a memory that I will cherish for the rest of my life.
See, that one question just prompted you. Memory lane. I'm going to go the other way now and ask you if you had any real points where you, not saying everything went wrong, but you maybe struggled or you've made a decision, you're like, I'm not sure if I've done the right thing, or have you had a point where you've just doubted what you've chose to do?
It wasn't so much a doubting what I've chose to do, but there was a weekend where I was on and there was total tragedy that happened right across Scotland. It was right in the middle of summer. People were out wild swimming, and I think there was something. Many people died that weekend. Mm-hmm. Kids ranging from age 7 right the way up to a family who passed away in the water at Loch Lomond at Ardlough. And it was myself and one other senior member of staff who were on hand in Glasgow. The other senior member of staff was focusing on digital output that day. And he was the only person in the building that was camera trained. We had other members of staff elsewhere in the country, but because of where a lot of the deaths had happened, it happened in Glasgow and the West. And so at that point, I think I was 24, a fairly junior member of staff at STV, and I had to pull up my trousers and, you know, make a good crack at reporting on something really, really serious and dispatching, you know, people to go places. And I was phoning my producer and I was doubting myself. I didn't know if I was doing the right thing. I was, you know, writing a script for my colleague who was travelling an hour and a half to get to the point of filming. I had ITV on the phone asking us if, you know, we could support them in any way. And I really felt like I had the weight of the world on me. And that's not because there weren't people there to support me, because there were. Every single person in that building that day was so supportive, and anybody else that I needed to speak to was just a phone call away. And they were great, and they really reassured me and reaffirmed me that what I was doing was the right thing to do. But it was a really mentally draining place to be. Yeah. It was one of those ones where I came home that night and I remember I got a takeaway that night, and I sat with my takeaway in front of the telly and reflected on what had just happened. And you're thinking about so many different things, you know, have you done these families justice? Have you reported in this in the most sensitive but factually correct way possible? Could you have spoken to anybody else? Have you given that story the time that it needed to breathe and the time that it needed to be told properly? That was really the only time that jumps to mind now that really made me question, is this the right move? Thanks to the support of the people who were in that room that day and the people who were on the other end of the phone, I came out of that a much more confident journalist. I think up to that point, there was always that little bit of imposter syndrome because I was so young and because, you know, when you're a young female and you're put in a position like that, it can be really overwhelming and really intimidating. But bringing myself out of the other end of that situation really, really instilled that confidence in me that actually I am capable and I can do this. And I needed that at that time. And now, thankfully, I can reflect back on that and hopefully use my voice to help inspire other people who maybe are having a bit of a wobble and thinking, I don't know if I can do this. You can. You absolutely can. Just have that little bit of self-belief. Throw yourself at the deep end and do it, because see, when you come out the other end, you're going to feel proud of yourself.
Couldn't agree more. On the support side, you touched on it there. Obviously having people around you and that they're always there to help. Even up to like present day, what's advice, what sort of advice you've been given in life that's kind of stuck with you?
Be really kind. That would be my number one thing, that just, you have to be kind. You have no idea what's going on with anybody.
Yeah.
And your kindness could transform someone's day. Your kindness could help inspire somebody. Your kindness could bring someone out of feeling utterly horrendous. But because you are kind to that person, it has, completely transformed something for them. I think that's so important, regardless of what you're doing, whether it's in the workplace or you're meeting someone on the street or you're out on a night out. Carry kindness in your heart and act in a way that would make you really proud. Treat unto others as you would do to yourself, and go about your day just with that in the forefront of your mind. There's no point in making judgments about people, because doing that gets you nowhere. I grew up in a working class family. If people knew that about me, I was always terrified about what people would say. And one thing that my dad really taught me was just be kind. If you kill people with kindness, and it doesn't matter where you're from, it doesn't matter your background, it doesn't matter what language you speak. It is a universal language to be a nice person. And it's something that I would encourage everybody to live by. It's just be kind.
Yeah. It's funny you say that with the working class thing, because I've spoken to loads of people that feel like that. But when you think about it, probably the majority of Scottish families are from that same kind of industry or line of work. But you do, I know exactly what you're talking about, because you do get that like, I'm pure mortified. But I don't know why it is. It's just it's weird hearing somebody else say that.
My mum and dad worked really, really hard to be able to give my brother and I the life that we had whilst we were growing up. And, reflecting on that, it's made us probably the most incredibly grateful versions of ourselves that we could be. I think having been in that position myself and having those self-doubts about whether or not I'm good enough or whether or not people will take me seriously has really fueled the fire in speaking to organisations which work with kids from disadvantaged backgrounds to help inspire them and help them understand that actually you can do anything you want to do. If you work for it and you believe in yourself, then the world's your oyster. And it's the most inspiring thing to look back on where my family's come from and how hard my parents have worked. And, looking at everything that we've achieved together as a family of four since then has just been incredible. And it's so heartwarming to know that I'm in a position now where I can help people achieve their goals and achieve their successes, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. And if it wasn't for my parents instilling that kindness message in me, I don't think I'd be there.
Love it. Miss International, so the final is 3 weeks away?
Just shy of 3 weeks now, actually. It's on the 18th of May, down in Warrington. There is myself and one other Scottish contestant. So I'm down not only flying the flag for Glasgow, but very much flying the flag for Scotland. The last Scottish winner was also called Sophie. So I'm hoping...
There's a bit of fate.
I'm hoping it's in the name, but no, there's a really, really fantastic group of women who are taking part in it this year from right across the UK. We had a finalist chat just the other night on Zoom, which felt like we were back in COVID times, but just having the opportunity to sit down and speak to the girls and find out why and what their purpose is and why they were moved to take part in Miss International over any other competition was really, really great. It's just made me really excited to meet them all in person on the 18th and have a really fantastic experience with them.
So talk me through the finals. How does it work? How does it whittle down to an eventual winner?
So we are all finalists, obviously. So I am Miss Glasgow International. There are Miss Insert City International from right across the UK. On the Friday, we will have our sort of meet and greet with everyone. That's not judged.
Right.
The next again day, we're up bright and early for rehearsals and interviews. So we'll be in rehearsals from about 9 o'clock in the morning because it is a big show. It really is. So, you know, there's an opening number. There are on-stage rounds. There are lots of different places and movements that you need to remember where to go. So we'll be in rehearsals from very, very early in the morning. And throughout the day of the rehearsals, we are taken in for an interview. So it's typically about 3.5 minutes long. And it's really your opportunity to showcase to the judges why you should be the next Miss International UK. That takes up a really weighty part of your overall score. After that, and when you get ready for your final, there is an onstage opening round. That's not judged. We'll do a swimwear round and we'll do an evening wear round. From then, typically it's whittled down to a top 12 or a top 10. From that, it'll be a top 6 or a top 5. And then it'll go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
How are the nerves going to be?
At the moment,
be honest.
At the moment, they're okay.
Right.
I think because I've not done it for a little while, the closer I get to the final, I'm going to start feeling a little bit nervous, but I think it will be pure adrenaline on the day. For me, I'm hoping it feels really nostalgic. I'm hoping that it feels like a culmination of all of the hard work that I've done really over the past decade, because it was a decade since my pageantry career began. And I'm hoping that I can use that platform and use that experience to help speak about the causes and the charities that I've supported, to help amplify the work that we're doing with Helping Hats, and to help inspire people to become the very best versions of themselves, regardless if I win or not. I'm just going to be so grateful to be in that experience with a group of other women who are empowered to do exactly the same thing.
You want to win though, don't you? You want to win. You want to win. You take part to win. You want to win.
I'm really looking forward to the experience.
Yeah, that means you want to win. I'll say it for you. She wants to win. She wants to win. This feels like a pure stupid question, given you have got about 900 things on the go. But what are the plans? What is the plans for you in the next couple of years? What do you want to be doing in the next couple of years?
I think just continuing to do what I love.
Yeah.
You know, for so long, as we've spoken about, I've done so many different things. I've done things and then I've stopped doing things and then I've picked them back up again. And right now I am in such a content place. I'm in a role that I love. I'm still able to dip into journalism whenever I want. I'm able to spend time with my friends and my family. I'm able to, work with life-changing organisations right across the UK who are making real differences in communities. And I go to bed with a smile on my face and I wake up with a smile on my face. And if I can continue to do that over the next 5 years with maybe a couple of other wee things thrown into the mix at the same time, then I will be absolutely delighted. I'll be delighted, and hopefully I'll have a sash that stops falling. No.
Get some sash glue or something, I think. Before I let you go, obviously we'd spoke about your niece before coming on, so I will give the floor to you to chat through your niece, her condition, what can we do to help, and we'll post links and things on the episode.
So at the start of the year, our lives were completely flipped upside down when my niece Aria, who is 2, was diagnosed with an incredibly rare, inoperable brain tumour called diffuse intrinsic pontine glioma, or DIPG for short. There is no known cure for this disease. It was a complete shock to our family. She was given a prognosis of between 6 and 9 months to live. So it's totally imaginable. It's something that you are never ever prepared to hear. She went into the children's hospital for a scan just to rule out different things, and when we were given that news, it was incredibly heartbreaking for us, is really the only way that I can describe it. So we have been raising funds through a GoFundMe to make sure that she has access to clinical trials, so that we can really do everything we can to make her little life as great as it possibly can be.
Yeah.
We are really fortunate in the sense that we have managed to fundraise over £50,000 so far, which is incredible. She has been able to experience so many wonderful things thanks to the kind-heartedness of different communities and organisations right across the UK. But, we always want to just make sure that she's got the best foot forward, and she's doing well. That's the best thing. She's doing really, really well. She's living her life. She's like a total crazy toddler who's just running about and loves seeing all of her friends and family who are coming to visit her. We've built a play park in my cousin's back garden for her, so she's out on the swings all the time. Nice. She's absolutely loving life, and we just want to make sure that she has the best time ever, and she is, which is great. So we're so thankful for all of the support that we've had so far as a family, but any support on top of that is wonderful, even if it is just raising awareness of what DIPG is, talking about it. We've been so grateful as a family to the communities of other families who have been going through exactly the same thing, who have been able to share their stories with us, and hearing their stories has been incredibly comforting for us. So just raising awareness of the profile of the disease and chatting about it so that people are aware of what it is is something that we're really passionate about. So thank you so much for letting me.
No, not at all. I'll add the link onto the episode as well, and we can share it so we can.
Thank you.
You never know who'll see it.
Thank you so much.
You never know. And I'll copy one of your lines to end with. Anything that we have not covered that you would like to talk about?
No, I think we're very much there. Like I say, the Miss International finals happen on the 18th of May. Not just myself, but there is an incredible catalogue of women who are taking part in this competition, who are raising awareness and funds for an array of different charities right across the UK. And so if you're interested in learning about any of their stories or the journeys that they're going through with their platforms, I really recommend going onto the Miss International Organisations page and having a wee read and just learning about it and being open to learning about all of the different things that we're doing to support communities right across the country, because it's an incredibly empowering organisation to be a part of, and I feel very, very proud to be able to share it with you.
Amazing. I feel like I'm a pageant expert now. I've had you and Amy on. I feel like I'm becoming a guru of sorts in the pageant world.
Well, if it wasn't for pageantry, I wouldn't know Amy. That's the thing. If it wasn't for pageantry, Amy's now one of my closest friends, and I was grateful to be on the judging panel that selected Amy as Miss Great Britain Glasgow. And it's been really, really special to watch her journey as someone who had never competed before to get to where she is now. She placed top 7 at Miss Great Britain, which is absolutely incredible. And being in a supportive system like that, where we've been able to form such a special friendship out of that, has just been amazing. And it stands testament to the fact that when you put yourself in a position where you're surrounded by women who have the same goal and purpose of making a real change within their communities and about the things that they're passionate about, then amazing things happen.
Definitely. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me again.
No, not at all. That means I get first interview when you win. That's just like that's the buy-in from that. That'll be the first news story of our new news podcast that will be coming out. Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Amazing.